Please be seated. I don't know if you've ever heard of the man named John Morton. John Morton was appointed as Archbishop of Canterbury by King Henry VII in 1486, who a year later also appointed him as Lord Chancellor. As such, the head of the church was now also tasked with restoring the royal estate depleted by Edward IV. Hoping to avoid being burned at the stake or languishing in a cell in the Tower of London should he fail, Morton came up with a brilliant business plan and instructed his tax collectors as follows. If the subject is seen to live frugally, tell him because he is clearly a money saver of great ability, he can afford to give generously to the king. If, however, the subject lives a life of great extravagance, tell him he too can afford to give largely, the proof of his opulence being evident in his expenditure. Therefore, Morton decreed no one was to be exempt from taxes. By the end of King Henry VII's reign, thanks to the king's frugality and Morton's tax policy, the treasury was replenished and Morton's life spared. His astute reasoning has been captured in the phrase, a Morton's fork, a choice between two equally unpleasant alternatives, or what we might call a dilemma, facing two unpleasant options and having to choose one of them. While you may have never heard of Morton's fork before, you may have heard, or worse yet, found yourself between the devil and the deep blue sea, or between a rock and a hard place, in a no-win situation perhaps, or my favorite, on the horns of a dilemma. Today's gospel provides us with not one but two examples of someone who finds himself in just such a tenuous and uncomfortable position. Herod Antipas, son of Herod the Great, and a part of a dynasty known for corruption and abuse, finds himself having to navigate through a difficult decision between two troublesome choices, not just once, but twice. Trying to balance the desire to please his wife Herodias, a woman incensed by John's very public and probably not delicately put accusations of adultery, and his own sense of confusion and fear about murdering someone he believed to be a holy and righteous man, Herod has John arrested. Because he figures if John is in jail, he's relatively safe from Herodias' rage, and he can also keep John from rabble-rousing in public. Little did he realize that this very temporary solution had unwittingly set himself up for an even bigger problem. If only he hadn't gotten a little too full of himself on his birthday. Eager to impress his friends and colleagues by wielding his considerable power, he gets caught up in Salome's provocative dancing and offers her anything, even half her kingdom, as a thank you for her performance. I wonder if in his wildest dreams he could have imagined that Herodias, working through her daughter, would return him to the horns of his dilemma. And I wonder how it felt when he decided to grant her request, choosing to save face instead of facing certain humiliation by sparing the life of John. What a moment of grace he was offered by God. What a gift he could have had if only he had chosen differently. If only. The need to make difficult decisions is not exclusive to history. It is very much a part of the human condition. Parents choose how to portion their time and energy between the demands of a career which brings material wealth and their family. Young mothers choose whether to spend their salary on childcare or food and shelter. Teenagers obsess over choices about friends, clothing, body image, activities, and how much to give in or how far to go to be accepted. Seniors struggle with choices surrounding independence, giving up the right to drive and continuing to live unassisted when their capabilities for self-care are diminished. Like most others, our own congregation wrestles with the desire to preserve resources, not only money but time and energy, or to spend them to fund the faithful vision of what we believe God is calling us to become. Whether we get into them by our own doing or they are something life presents to us, situations like these are difficult, and the decisions we must make are not easy. But here's the thing. Even and especially in the most challenging circumstances, God's grace is an ever-present possibility, waiting to be discovered and allowing us to see the holy even when we are posed on a Morton's fork. Moreover, when we choose poorly, and sometimes we will, that is not the final word. For there is nothing in this life we can choose that is beyond God's redemption. Not one thing so horrible that God's grace is not somehow present and offered ours for the taking. That is God's promise, purchased for us through Jesus Christ, who, when he found himself on the horns of a dilemma that night in the Garden of Gethsemane, chose to respond in love for us. May we always respond likewise. Amen.